Start our recording. All right. So probably the first thing we should chat about is the fact that we have our first lecture quiz coming up on Thursday. And that's going to basically be over chapter 1 and parts of 3. And trying to remember if I sent you an email about what part of 3 we were going to include on the quiz. Did I or did I not send you that email? I just cannot remember. I've been sending so many emails to people.
I don't think I got one. No.
Okay. So what I'd like to do, since we have scheduled for this week to get through chapter 3, I was going to suggest that we have that quiz include section 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. So in essence, sort of the first half of the chapter, basically. This is a 5-point quiz, so short and sweet. So everybody clear on what is on the quiz. Then we should, of course, talk about when will it be open for you to take the quiz on Thursday. My initial thinking was, and I do know that some of you have other things going on from that 1:15 to 2:30 time frame, which is when, of course, we're meeting on Tuesdays. But my thinking was to have it open, during that time, because that's kind of when we're meeting on Tuesdays. I don't know if that's going to create an issue for a ton of people or what. We're not going to be able to find a time that's going to work for everybody. I'm not opposed to having a couple different times open, but I don't know. What are your thoughts? I guess maybe let me just throw out the question: how many could take it between 1:15 and 2:30 on Thursday? And let's see, how do we do this? If you could indicate maybe in the chat, just put a Y for yes. I should learn how to do a poll, shouldn't I? That would be so much easier. So that's a lot of you, not everybody probably. So Jocelyn says Thursday evening works better. Okay. Okay, Stephanie says evening too, all right. Ashley still cannot hear. Well, I could sign it for you, but I'm not sure that would work. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to post the quiz, and this will be like for the rest of the semester. I'm going to post the quiz on Thursday from 1:15 to 2:30. And then for those of you that have work conflicts or what have you, I would like you to email me with, say, an hour block, or the quizzes aren't going to take an hour, but I'm thinking about the exams too. We might want to do the exams at the same sort of time too. So give me a time frame, okay? So Jocelyn, Stephanie, Sarah. Yeah, the quiz is 5 points. It's going to take you literally, 5-6 minutes. It's going to be not going to be a long time frame. All right. Everybody clear on that? Quizzes will be Thursday, 1:15 to 2:30. I'll leave that block open. And if that does not work for you, if you want it later in the evening, I need to know that. And I would like to know that by tomorrow, certainly. By say 5 p.m. tomorrow. So I can get the system, ready to go. I have been going into Respondus to see how many of you have been able to get on okay. And for the most part, people have had no major issues. It's new, I know. So we're going to give it a shot. We're going to try to see if it works tomorrow, or Thursday rather. And I think the more we do it, Sarah, send me an email, please. The more we do it, the more I get comfortable with setting up, the more you get comfortable taking it, it's going to just be a routine that we won't even think twice about after a couple of times. At least that's the hope. All right, any questions on that? And if you haven't gone in and done the practice test, I will politely kick you in the rear a fourth time, because I've sent notes to you guys that haven't done it. Get in there and do it so we can make sure it works. Okay, great. Any comments, questions on that? Okay, thank you, thank you. I did post the PowerPoint Zoom lecture for the first 3 sections of chapter 3. I think I did that Sunday. And my goal is to wrap up the remaining sections of chapter 3 and post those Zoom lectures in the course shell. I'll probably do that, I think, on Thursday. It's my plan. So what I'm thinking that maybe we could try to do is touch base when we meet on Tuesdays, and then we can kind of indicate like how much of a given chapter will be on the quiz that next 48 hours later or whatever. I don't think it's fair to put an entire chapter on a quiz if you haven't had access to the Zoom recording of that part of the chapter. So for example, like next week, we have our second lecture quiz on the 11th, and we have chapter 4 scheduled. I'm going to probably suggest that the quiz on the 11th will be the last half of 3 and the first half of 4. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah, so that's kind of how I'm going to be approaching the quiz material. So if you're kind of wondering, you can ask. I will try to remember every Tuesday to say, okay, guys, quiz Thursday, and it's over X, Y, and Z. But if I forget, it'll probably be over, the second half or whatever we didn't get through the preceding week, and whatever we get through, the first half of that week of the quiz. Clear as mud, right? Okay. All right, I'm going to just open the floor for questions, because I think that's how we thought we might try to do these Tuesday meetings, is to ask you to get into the Zoom lectures, get into the textbook, see where you're having problems, where there are questions that you'd like to go over.
I had a stupid question, but it's not actually necessarily pertaining the material. But so on your chapter lectures on Blackboard, so there's the part 1 and part 2 of the chapter 1, and then it says chapter 2, but that's supposed to be chapter 3, right?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
The tools of the laboratory. Okay, I was just making sure.
2 was chemistry, I think. So I meant to say chapter 3, 1 of 2.
Okay, your YouTube video is labeled right, but not on Blackboard, but I just wanted to make
Yeah, no,
sure that that was the case.
I tell you what, it's just terrible. I do these silly things. That's what happens when you get old, right?
I'm only 25. I totally understand.
Okay,
So
great.
it's
I
not
feel
just
better.
you.
Appreciate that. These little bitty things, though, make a difference. So I appreciate you catching that, Juliana, and do ask if there's ever a question about that. Don't be afraid to ask. So how about chapter 1? Are you good with chapter 1? That's just that introductory chapter, although it did cover quite a few different topics, you know, ranging from what is microbiology? How does it sort of fit into the broader field of biology? And then we got into a little bit with regard to historical figures in the field. There's a really nice making connections section on page 15 of your book that goes into the contributions of Francesco Redi and John Needham and the theory of abiogenesis or spontaneous generation, as well as biogenesis, meaning life from life. Yeah, there's just an amazing array of characters in this saga. And what always just blows my mind is how could people have thought that by throwing old, dirty, sweaty rags in the corner of a room, and then when you picked them up, you saw all these rats scurry, think that the rats came from the dirty rags. You know, we just think like, what were they smoking at the time or whatever? But they were making observations, and they were making, you know, inaccurate conclusions based upon their observations, but it was observational. And it was really the advent of the scientific method and the rigorous steps that one must take, right, to accurately study and assess and draw conclusions based upon results, that scientists began to look at phenomena in their world in a much more regimented way. And I'm not going to get political here, but you know, we talk about speaking truth in our science or in politics, and following the science, right? Whether it's COVID-19 or whatever it is. When we go off the rails and start talking about things that are not based in reality or science, we run into some real potential problems. So I will stop there on that. We got to follow the science. We've got to do that. Case in point, COVID-19, right? Doing our testing allows us to see how prevalent it is in our society and in our communities, and we can better control it, hopefully. And then chapter 1 gets into a little bit about taxonomy, the way of classifying and organizing organisms. This gives us some sense of how they might be related to one another. And when you're a researcher in Spain and you talk about a particular microorganism that you're studying, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, let's say, that same set of terms means the same thing to that Spanish researcher as it does the Russian researcher, as it does the American researcher. We all speak the same sort of language, and that's really what taxonomy helps to do in adopting this common, you know, language of science. When we discuss a particular organism, we're calling it the same thing. So anyway, kind of an overview. Any problems with chapter 1? Questions on chapter 1 stuff?
I noticed that you had in the book there was a study of like, or it showed vocabulary for the different studies relating to microbiology. Are those, should we be like memorizing those?
Can you specifically tell me what you're referring to?
there's like a list of the bacteriology, mycology, protozoology, and so on. It's just like vocabulary, like what those studies are.
Oh, like on page
I don't remember what page it was on.
page 4, maybe. Yeah, where they're listing it, they're giving bulleted listings of subspecialties within within biology. Yeah, no, you don't need to know that a mycologist studies fungi, or that a uh, well, trying to think of another example. A zoologist studies animals. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
No, you do not have to memorize the definitions.
Okay.
No. I think though that, when the book introduces terms and they put them in boldface, I think that's a good thing to kind of hone in on. The boldface terms. Yeah, as I'm perusing through the chapter and I look at those words, I think those are good to know what those words mean.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Other comments, questions related to chapter 1?
The microbial dimensions that are in the PowerPoint,
Yeah.
do we need to memorize those?
Well, I think that you should know what a micrometer is and how does it relate to millimeter.
Okay.
What is a nanometer? How does that relate to a micrometer? I know for most students, when they look at these units, metric units, it just confuses the heck out of them. And I'm not exactly sure why that is, other than we're used to, 12 inches is a foot. What makes 12 so special, right? Wouldn't it be better to use units of 10? And we all agree that, yeah, it would be, but that's not how we learned it. So it becomes a little more challenging. But I think, let me just pull up that that PowerPoint that you're referring to. When we describe how small bacteria are, and I know we haven't looked at any yet. Let's see, chapter 1. Hang on, let me just pull this up. I think it's useful, personally, for students to have some concept of units and how small these things are. So, share screen, chapter 1. Where is exercise? Why isn't it on there? Okay. Do you see the PowerPoint now? Yes? Yeah, okay. So Juliana is referring to, I think, this slide here probably, right? And so it's really not that hard if you just stop and think about it. Again, the meter stick. You've worked with it in lab, most of you. Think back to that experiment we did in A&P1, right? You should know that there are 10 millimeters in a centimeter. You should know there are 100 centimeters in a meter. You should know that a meter has 1,000 millimeters. That you should know without even hardly thinking about it. However, when we start thinking about taking one of those millimeters, which we can see, take a ruler out of your lab drawer bench, right? You all know what a millimeter is. And dividing that up 1,000 times, each one of those little subdivisions would be a micrometer. And we use this kind of funny U-shaped symbol to indicate that unit. So there are 1,000 of those in a millimeter. That's like saying 1 micrometer is 1/1000th of a millimeter. That's what this 10 to the minus third means, 1/1000th of. Okay, we all wrap our heads around that. Now take that micrometer and divide it up 1,000 times, and you have a nanometer, or nm. So it's 1/1000th of a micrometer, or 1/1,000,000th of a meter. And the only reason that I think it's helpful, especially to have a sense of this micrometer unit, relates, you can go to this diagram, or you can go to one in chapter 3 also. Because when we start talking about bacteria, which obviously we will be doing soon, or viruses, look at the units we're using. We can't use millimeters anymore, obviously. We have to start using micrometers when we talk about the size of a ciliate or a protozoan. And those of you that had lab today, you know what I'm talking about. You saw them, you know, paramecium, for example, or Volvox. Those we'd have to measure in micrometers. They're small. And then when we get down to bacteria or viruses, we have to transition from micrometer into nanometers. So again, just to give you some rudimentary sense of how small these, you know, COVID-19 particles are. They are terribly small. They're about the size of the HIV virus. So we're talking 70 nanometers. Wow. You would need an electron microscope to see those. And we talk about that in chapter 3. Long answer to a short question, huh, Juliana? But that's kind of what I would say.
That's okay. That makes a lot more sense. I guess the different symbols had me a little bit confused.
Oh, okay. So that funny shape U, that's micrometer, 1,000 of those in a millimeter, and then the nm, 1,000 of those in a micrometer.
Okay.
Or another way of saying that, 1,000,000 of those in a millimeter.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Good question. How about other questions related to chapter 1? Okay, so sounds like chapter 1 wasn't so bad. Have you had a chance to get into chapter 3 at all? And are there any questions on microscopy or resolution? We get into a little bit about staining, which we'll be doing in lab in about 2 or 3 weeks. Have you looked at the first part of chapter 3?
Chapter 3, does that have anything to do with exercise 1 in our lab handbook? Because there was a question on one of those about resolution.
Yes, or exercise 1 in the lab book was the bright field microscopy, I think, right? That I asked you to read over last week. And so absolutely, Sarah, it does talk about bright field microscopy in chapter 3. This is basically we're using that light source right from below. That's what bright field microscopy basically means. There are other types of microscopy that I'm not going to really talk much about because we just don't use it. There's phase contrast, there's fluorescent microscopy, there's electron microscopy, there's other dark field microscopy. There's different kinds of microscopes that you can use to look at organisms, and they talk a little more about that there on page 68. But I'm not going to ask you about dark field, phase contrast, differential interference contrast microscopes. Just know what bright field is, because that's what we use. And then I do talk in the Zoom lecture about transmission and scanning electron microscopes and the interesting photographs you can get from them. It's really, really interesting. But there's a little bit of overlap. Now, you had mentioned that both talk about resolution, and you're exactly right. And so what resolution gets at is the ability of an instrument like a microscope to see fine details. And so let me pull up the chapter 3 PowerPoint, because there's a particular figure that I'm going to have us look at, and some of you may know what I'm talking about. And it all has to do with the wavelength of energy used to examine that particular object. So let me go back, let me share screen. There we go. Hopefully you're seeing the chapter 3 PowerPoints. And the diagram that I'm envisioning is basically this slide. Okay. And so what this gets at is the fact that in bright field microscopy, like we do in lab, if you use shorter wavelengths of visible light to shine on the object on the slide, you will generally get more resolution. You'll have a better ability to see finer details than if you used longer wavelengths of visible light. So there's a little bit of physics here. So here's a 30-second crash course on physics. You may know that when you look at visible light coming from the sun, when it refracts off raindrops during a spring shower, and you look to the east and you see the rainbow, right? You've all seen rainbows. And the rainbow ranges from what? The red, orange, through, I don't know all my primary colors, green and yellow, and then ultimately blue and purple. Probably not in that order, but the red and orange would be considered the longer wavelengths of visible light, while there's the green or the blue and violet are the shorter wavelengths of light. So built into our microscopes, in the condensers of our microscopes, is a blue filter. And that promotes the utilization of those shorter wavelengths of light, which gives us better resolution. So this slide basically says, let's pretend that these big yellow circles represent long wavelengths of light. And let's pretend these little bitty yellow circles represent tiny, shorter wavelengths of light. Which do you see with better detail? Well, obviously, you can see the outline of all 5 fingers here using the shorter wavelengths versus some rudimentary resemblance of a hand. Not even, I don't know if you even recognize that as a hand if you look at it, right? You can see the palm maybe and so on, but that's about it. So resolution is determined by wavelength. And we can take that a step farther and talk about how electron microscopes make use of these subatomic particles you know as electrons. And they utilize, again, an even smaller wavelength of energy. It's not light, okay? It's not light, it's energy. It's a form of energy, and light is a form of energy too. But it's utilizing atomic energy to get down to magnifications of 5 million times the actual size. That's the maximum magnification I think you get with most electron microscopes. 5 million times actual size. That's just mind-boggling. But that's basically why, because it makes use of these extraordinarily short wavelengths of light, of energy. See, don't you wish you took physics? How about other comments, questions, chapter 3 stuff? Anything causing you problems? Don't worry about the mathematics here. I'm not going to ask you to calculate resolving power. I'm not going to ask you to do any heavy duty lifting in terms of math. I do think you should be able to tell me what the total magnification is of an object viewed with a compound light microscope if you know the ocular lens and the objective. magnification. I mean, that's just basic third grade math, right? You take 10, which is the objective or the ocular lens magnification, multiplied by whatever objective magnification you're using. That's really more lab stuff, but they talk about that on page 65 of the book. So Carolina, 1 millimeter equals 1,000 micrometers. Yep, and 1 nanometer equals 1,000. No, 1,000 nanometers equals 1 micrometer. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, come on. I can't believe there aren't questions. Maybe you're having no problems with this stuff. This isn't really getting into a lot of heavy duty technical stuff yet either. Wait till we get into cellular respiration and review glycolysis and citric acid cycle and all that fun stuff. That's where I'm sure you will really shine because you like that stuff. So Ashley got her sound working. The quiz is Thursday. I'm opening it up from 1:15 to 2:30. Unless that doesn't work for you, then you must email me and tell me when Thursday would work. Well, I hate to end class early. But if you have no questions, I guess we could. Jocelyn, as long as you're still here, I'd like to chat about, if you're having any trouble with respondents, right, then we could use some time now to talk about that. Anybody who is concerned about that or has had issues, let me know. We could probably have some time today to chat about that too.
My only issue is it works. I'm in nursing too, and it works, like my video camera works for that, and it's working right now. But when I go to do the Respondus thing, it tells me that I don't have a webcam and it's not working. And I went through like the troubleshooting thing it said to do, and it's still not. Like I've restarted my computer and everything.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. You've downloaded the browser, right?
Yeah, I downloaded it and everything. It's on my home screen.
I think
I know with,
did you give it access?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know
It
with
popped up.
mine, like if I do it here at my house, it'll like record me, but then it won't send it to Professor Ratterman.
So what happened? That's what kind of did with me. So I did it the first time and it worked. My camera came up, and then the second time when I went to go back in, it didn't work.
I know with my quiz, I tried probably 50 times and it kept telling me this didn't work, that didn't work. It would shut it down. And I think mine has a lot to do with the service because I only have like a hotspot to do mine. And if I go downtown, it'll work. So I don't know if maybe that's what's going on with yours.
I can try that today because I'm at Jenna's house today. So I can try it here and see if it works and see if it's just my internet.
That would be a good troubleshooting thing to try to see if we can narrow it down to is it like you said a poor connection sort of issue.
Yeah, because mine, like, my hotspot isn't always the greatest. Like through class, it'll pop up and say my bandwidth is slow. But like it works now, even so I don't know. And that's why I figured I'd try it downtown to see if it works better.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to inconvenience you having to go down to, sit in McDonald's lot to take your quiz or whatever.
I'll go to Tim Hortons and drink coffee. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, my goal is not to inconvenience you or make your life more miserable or harder than it is, because I know we're all stressed out. So, we'll do our best. We'll just see how it works. And if we just cannot come to some resolution, Jocelyn, then let's just chat, you and I, and we'll come to some plan B, if you will.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Don't fret about it. You tried, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate you all getting on there and trying it out. And as I said, this is new to me. I am not an expert on it either. But it seemed like most people didn't have a whole lot of problems, which was good.
So now, as far as it goes, if I can't get the camera to work, do you just want me to take the practice quiz with just the audio then? Or do you
Try
just
it.
want me not to do it?
Oh, no, go ahead and try it. See what happens. We can try it.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Why
Because
not?
I'm stuck in the help center thing and I didn't know if you wanted me to do the quiz because my camera's not working. So just try it and just, if I can't get it with the camera, just do the audio for the pre-test there.
If it doesn't work, try it just audio.
Okay.
Sure, that's fine. Okay, and again, we can chat about that separately too. Anybody have any questions you want to ask about 1 or 3? Okay, well then we'll call an early end to today's class, and then if anybody wants to hang around and talk about respondus or concerns or questions or whatever, I'm here till 1 or till 2:30. I have lab at 2:40, but I'm certainly around till 2:30 too. So we'll see some of you in an hour or less for lab. Bye. You guys have a question?
Yeah, I put mine in the chat. Can
Oh.
you just let me know if you got my practice quiz all right? I just want to make sure I'm not one of them that didn't send it in or something.
Yes. Let me make a note. You have lab this afternoon?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll talk to you then about that.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
I sent you a message in chat.
Oh yeah, you can come down now if you want.
Okay.
Okay, Stephanie, did you have a question?
I was just wondering, because you referred to your lab, if there's going to be exam questions related to that, because I'm not taking your lab.
So is your question, is there any lab material on the lecture quizzes?
Right, because you refer to the lab a lot.
Oh, well, the reason that I mentioned that is because for lab, I have the students look at the microscopy exercise that we were going to do last week, but we couldn't do it because we didn't meet face to face, but I asked them to read it over. But ordinarily, no, I would not ask you any directly ask you any lab related questions on the lecture exam. No. So don't think that's gonna be an issue. I do go back and forth. I will talk to you guys in lecture about what's been going on in lab because they do really intertwine together. Have you had lab yet?
I'm taking lab right now,
Okay.
the virtual lab with
Yeah.
another instructor because your
Yeah.
lab didn't work with my schedule. So I am taking it. It's just the virtual version.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you're going to hear me refer to lab stuff because, again, both sort of cross-pollinate one another in some respects, but the lecture stuff is, you know, while both lecture and lab have same material, I'm not going to ask you lab stuff on the lecture quizzes or lecture exams.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, no, you didn't. Tanisha, question.
So, the question I had is if I'm moving around during the quizzes or exams, will I get kicked out or anything like that?
Well, the video is gonna note that. So the quizzes are going to be, you know, short and sweet. They're only going to be 5-7 minutes at the most. Is that the problem?
Well, I'm hoping not, but with the new baby, I do only breastfeed with him. So I'm kind of concerned about the exams mainly.
Yeah, I see. Well, I think we can probably work around that as best we can. As much as you have control over things, which is not a lot probably. Are you coming to campus at all?
Yeah, I was just in your lab, but that's the only time I come into class is for lab.
Okay. So you don't have any classes Thursday on campus?
No.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's chat about that as we get closer to the first exam, which isn't for another, oh gosh, when's the first test? February 25th. So that's 3-4 weeks from now. How about if we chat about that in 2 weeks? Why don't you just kind of stop in one of my Zoom office hours, or we can talk after lab on Tuesday too.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So is